into the air. So now we focus from water more to the air. And as you have learned since very young in physical science about acid rain, we are going to see how will that contribute to the influence that us as humans have on our beautiful planet. And of course, we first want to know what is acid rain. And acid rain, of course, are the gases, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, that are produced due to human activities, motor vehicles, factories, and this will dissolve in the water vapor, condensation take place, and now we know clouds will rain, but precipitation that is mixed with this acid, sulfuric acid and nitric acid, will eventually return back to the earth. And that is what acid rain is. So the burning of fossil fuels, vehicles, and chemicals from large factories, sulfur dioxide, nitrogenous oxides will cause the gases accumulating and dissolving in the water vapor. The effects of acid rain is that human structures that are made out of limestone will be dissolved by the acids. The soil, together with the organisms living in the soil, will be affected. Water and plants will change. And I want us to start with the acid rain that cause lower pH and high aluminium concentrations in the surface water. So acid, we understand, lowers pH. Aluminium, the acids that fall on the soil, now removed the metals, and the metals leached into the water bodies. And high levels are toxic for the animals in the ocean. So, biodiversity, a huge variation of organisms that can fill up a food web so that everyone can stay alive, will be reduced. Lakes, rivers are fragile ecosystems where each species depend on other to survive. So if one disappears, it will have an effect on the other. Here we see a limestone statue, but the buildings are also made out of limestone, and you can see how it is dissolved due to the high acid in the air. And here we see very clearly when the acid depositions came down and it fall on the soil, the calcium leached from the needles and the layers on top of the tree, the cuticles, are being removed. So now the leaf is exposed for diseases, and we know it also prevents evaporation, and the tree will be much colder. Aluminium, as we have said, will not only leach into the soil water together with other calcium and magnesium metals move into water, but the aluminium will also destroy the hair roots, and the plant will suffer to absorb water. And the calcium and magnesium will leach into the soil, and the heavy metals will eventually end up into the water body. So if you care to look in your textbook on page 578 and 579, you will find there all the different effects. In the soil, this leaching out of minerals make the soil with less nutrients in it, and the microorganisms can also not do their job in the acids. The pH is too low for them. The water, aluminium, mercury in water bodies is toxic. It will kill the plankton, which is the producers, and so the whole food chain will change, and it can also damage the groundwater and our drinking water. On plants, it dissolves nutrients like magnesium, calcium, and potassium from the leaves, and the leaves will then change from a nice green color to a brown color. It damages the fine root hairs, as we said, and that reduces the productivity of the farm and the forest land. It damaged the leaves, it damaged the barks, and now there's a possibility for diseases, and it attacks the waxy cuticle. I hope that you followed in your textbook. And what can we do to prevent that? Having the metals washed out of the leaf, the cuticle are removed, and we can see it is exposed, getting brown, diseases, and it can die. Scrubbers are a mechanism, a little equipment tool that they put in the chimneys of factories that will, as they say here, it will remove the sulfur dioxide from power stations and electricity generating facilities. In motor cars, they put in the exhaust system catalytic converters, which will also convert the nitrogen oxide into a nitrogen gas. And we know that our atmosphere do not have a problem with nitrogen gas. No, they are 78%. So we can now remember the scrubbers, for sulfur dioxide back to sulfur, and that is in the power stations. Power stations. That can help us to remember. Scrubbers, sulfur dioxide to sulfur in the power stations. Then the catalytic converters in the motor cars, and we know motor cars, nitrogen is what they need. So the nitrogen dioxide change into nitrogen, and we know our air can continue with some nitrogen in it. We can limit fossil fuels by buying cars that works on electricity, yes, or we can drive with our bicycles. We can try to limit transport, but I think that is not very realistic in our country with its huge distances. Coal are crushed and washed before it is used to remove the sulfur, and oil are also being treated to remove sulfur. That is how we reduce acid rain. And then, when we look at all these fuels that are being burned, this oil that we use as an energy generating source, it is detrimental and dangerous when it ends up in our ocean. Here we see pictures. You know, if you are a bird and you need your feathers either to float or to fly, and it is full of oil, it is impossible to move. You will die because you cannot find food, and you become an easy prey for the predators. Here we see the fur on the seals, which are also covered and clogged with oil, and it is not good for them. And here we see a huge and large oil spill. So, I want you to look in your book and see if you can make a list of damage that can be done by an oil spill. And I want you to look at land animals, marine animals, and even the smaller microorganisms and smaller creatures. And remember to look at what is happening to the plants. And this is a little video that I want you to look at. Right, and that brings us to, you saw in the video a few plants that you can make using oil booms. Oil booms is that huge pipe that can trap the oil. Oil floats on water. And then they use skimmers and sorbents that can absorb the oil. They can burn it, but I wonder what is the effect of that fire of huge oil spills on the water temperature and then on the water animals. Dispersants, which help them to move away the little oil. You know, when we add some sunlight liquid to our oily fatty dishes, it's also dispersed. Now, hot water and high pressure washing, using manual labor by raking and picking it up with shovels. Bioremediation is where they have bacteria and microorganisms that can feed on the oil and break them up. Like an oil decomposer is something that they also already are using. Chemical stabilization of oil by special chemicals. And then the natural recovery, where they just wait for the oil to be removed and spread out over the ocean. Now, that class brings me to sewage. So sewage is also a waste product of humans that we cannot change now. And with sewage, unfortunately, if it is not treated well, lots of diseases, non-parasitic diseases, polio, cholera, typhoid, hepatitis, which is caused by pathogens, and others like tapeworm, roundworm, and bilharzia are all diseases that exist due to untreated sewage. And the effects of typhoid, I show you here, high fever, headache, dry cough, constipation, rashes, all caused by a little bacteria with very long pili that you can see here. Cholera and dysentery, both stomach discomforts, and also very dangerous diseases. And then, very interesting, what is sewage? Sewage will be, and I read from your book, sewage will be pollutant from the kitchen, from the bathroom, and from the toilets, which contain human feces, detergents, bacteria, urine, parasites, and other disease-causing organisms. That is sewage. But when we refer to that part that came from the toilet, the feces and the urine, we know that urine and feces contains a lot of nitrogenous waste, especially urea. And what do we remember? That the urea can be changed into ammonium or ammonia. Ammonia. You agree? And when that ends up in the water bodies due to sewage that is being pumped into the water, it will provide nutrients for 1. Microorganisms, and microorganisms will immediately start to decompose it. When they decompose it, the microorganisms will be feeding, and in both these processes they used up oxygen. But that will also be nutrients to algae. And algae will start to bloom. It means they will become a lot. And they will cover the top layer of the water body. You agree? Here we have our nice water body, but now the top part is covered by algae bloom, lots of algae, and the microorganisms are using the oxygen to decompose and to become a lot. What will happen lower? No sunlight, no photosynthesis, no replacement of oxygen. No replacement of oxygen used up by the decomposers, and photosynthesis cannot take place. So now we will have more dead organisms due to the lack of oxygen. These algae will slowly start to die, and we will have a nasty smell in the bottom of this water body. But what we will also have is all the animals, the fish, and other organisms will either die or move away. And what do we call all of this? Eutrophication. Please make sure that you can write this answer on page 581 in your textbook, as that is now interesting that fertilizers ending up in water cause eutrophication. Fertilizers? And do we use urine and feces for fertilizers? Also. So sewage and fertilizers contribute to eutrophication. And we must also remember that in sewage there can be lots of chemicals and detergents that can build up in organisms, bioaccumulation, and as it's moving down the food chain, it can magnificate. Biomagnification can happen at the end of the food chain, which means there's lots of toxic and poison in the organisms. Anaerobic organisms can produce methane, which is a greenhouse gas, and then of course this poisonous and bad smelling hydrogen sulfide that can also be a product of untreated sewage.
In this love, it has made us blind. You got money, but still you it when you die. Love, everybody needs it. Love was meant for you and me. Love, everybody needs it. Love was meant.
Good morning, grade 12. Yes, and this brings us to our second last chapter, which will refer to the influence that humans have on the environment. We did start our ecology with what is a sustainable ecosystem. We know all the definitions. What is an ecosystem? A species forming populations. Populations forms communities. And we also see how important it is that the living factor, the organisms in a specific area at a specific time have an influence on one another, but also how the environment, which means the conditions, together with the living parts, have an effect on one another. Then we looked at populations, and it was interesting to see how differently the humans behave when we compare it to how a natural population behave. You remember the J curve, which is for humans and bacteria, and the S curve. And today we are going to spend some time on human influences on the environment. And I want to start with one of my favorite people of all time, and that was Chief Seattle. He was an Indian, and he was a chief there who needed to guide and give leadership to his people, the Indians, that is in the same place as where Seattle in America is now. So he said, the earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. And that brings us, what is the influence of man to the environment? We start immediately with the food problem. Yes, as human numbers are increasing, the food supply needs to increase. But with increase in food supply, the farmers have an opportunity to earn money through that. So we have need of food, but also a way to use this food as an income. So what happens? Value of modern technology for increased food production. And what happens was that the old ways of working in the land with little equipment and taking lots of time changed by using huge machinery, mechanical methods. They can prepare the soil. Large areas of soil can be prepared in order to make sure that planting works well, that germination can take place, and of course that there's a good harvest. To have a good harvest, we know fertilizers need to be added. Now, they have good machinery that can even apply the fertilizers, but we also know that we are in an ecosystem, so when we are planting nice growing vegetables, fruit production, or mealies, wheat, then there will also be some other organisms that would love to eat from it. When they become so many that they bring damage to the harvest, we need to use some pesticides, because then we say we have pests that is plaguing the harvest. So pesticides can also be provided by huge machineries. Faster production means that faster production, first at the market, more money. Faster production means also that there are food supply to a lot of people. Nah. Larger crops and less labor. That is what the value of modern technology means. Faster production, larger crops, less labor. Less labor means I do not have that many salaries or wages to pay at the end of the month. Right. This earns money. The pesticides, the fertilizers, help to increase the harvest by producing better and larger produce. And in order to have all this, we know we need soil preparation to be perfect. We can also add here water supply, irrigation. The irrigation methods also are now done with huge spraying facilities. So that is the value. If we look at now specifically the use of fertilizers, we know that fertilizers are necessary in the form of nitrogen, right, in the form of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. Now, and I always remember nitrogen for the roots. A plant starts at the roots. Then the phosphate will work on the stem, and the potassium works on the fruits and the flowers. First flowers, then fruits. Now, and we know how important is nitrates, phosphates, potassium, plus magnesium in order to have a healthy plant. I remind you here in photosynthesis, where we have learned chlorophyll needs nitrates and phosphates. You remember that? And the enzymes are being built. And when they are not there, stunted growth, yellowing of leaves, sclerosis. So perhaps you can just make a note and look back at that part. And eventually we need a higher yield. Pesticides. Pesticides make due that our harvest are very weak. Or you have the most beautiful apples or lemons or oranges or even a cup of maize. And then when you reach the market, there are large holes or rotten parts in it, and that helps if you can control the pests. Unfortunately, these pests become resistant to the pesticides, and therefore they need to do research every year to change the pesticides. With that, unfortunately, they need to become more toxic each year in order to control the pests. Then we know the word genetic engineering, whereby the interference of human changing the genes to improve the crops. We say we can have a pesticide, resistance to pest can increase, for instance, better yields by combining genes, or selective breeding. I choose the cow with the best milk production and the bull that will help her to bring forth little calves, also one with a mother with high milk production. And that is selective breeding, whereas a breeder I select. I can do that with fruits and do my own fertilization with a little paintbrush, and then I can make sure that I have a high yield. Chemical techniques change byproducts into useful substances. So when we have a lot of byproducts that was once just discarded as waste, it can now be used as a byproduct with chemical techniques, and it can be processed so that it can be sold, and that brings another income or an income for another company. And our next problem is agriculture damaged by deforestation. Agriculture means working the land, and damage to the environment because of agriculture. We start with deforestation. If you need to explain deforestation, it means to cut down and remove all trees, large bushes, in order to have an open area. So open area for agriculture will mean for cattle farming, we will clear land, but we will also clear land for making a land to plant. And it is caused due to land clearance, and the moment when the land is clear, we have soil erosion, the top layer of soil where all the nutrients and the humus and the microorganisms, humus, nutrients, microorganisms will be open. They will not be held together by the roots of the plants, and they will move away with the first irrigation or water from rain. Flooding will happen and remove soil, but it will also take away any plants that has been growing there. With land clearance, photosynthesis cannot take part. That means carbon dioxide levels will increase and oxygen levels will decrease. We need carbon dioxide, yes, but carbon dioxide at high levels in the air not being used by photosynthesis means increase in the greenhouse gases in the earth, increase in the temperature, and that leads to global warming. Oxygen is needed for us to respire, and that will get lower in these areas. Habitats between the bushes and the trees, that was the living space of the organisms, and now they have no habitat, and it changed, and they either have to move away or stay there and die. That leads to extinction of species where genes are lost. Okay, so what is it to me if there are a few plants that's going to die forever and ever? If you remember, potatoes, tomatoes, mealies, wheat, all were once a wild little plant in the veld that was only used by the local people of that area. And today, all over the world, we can use that as a good source of food. Medicine are made from plants. Yes, perhaps you think, okay, but I can buy the Disprin on the shelf. No, a Disprin, the original Disprin was the bark of a tree. And there they found the recipe to make the medicine. And in the future, it can diminish our food sources. Pollution takes place because we burn to clear the land. And that means less tourists to come and look at our beautiful environment if there are no habitat for animal to live. Nobody will want to look at that area. There's no animals to look at, and there are no nice camping spots on a cleared land where the soil is eroded. So that is unfortunately the end of that area. If we look at deforestation. So grade 12, up to here we said, people are growing. The number of people, population of humans are increasing every day, and they need food supply. So farmers need modern equipment in order to make food supply a reality, increase food supply, quality of food supply. And it did change a lot over the last few years. But then we see, in order to have a good food supply, we need to clear the land, which we call deforestation. Now, and then the last part of our lesson today is fertilizer. So we said we need various fertilizers, and these fertilizers will help the plant to be green, produce chlorophyll, have enough enzymes, produce a high quality of food. But we are unfortunately doing also a lot of damage by the fertilizers. And why do we use it? We have the answer. It is to increase the yield of the plant due to various reasons. And we can mention nitrates, phosphates, magnesium, and also iron. And we can tell what is the role of each part. I refer you to the chapter on photosynthesis. Why photosynthesis? That is where to produce is explained to us. Yes? So, unfortunately, if we overuse fertilizer, you know, if you smell something that is not smelling nice, you take some spray and you psh, psh, and if it's not psh, psh, more. Nah. Now, overuse of fertilizer will do damage. Nitrates and phosphates are extremely soluble. What happens when you irrigate your piece of land? That nitrates and phosphates dissolve in the water. That water will leach, please use the word leach, into the streams. Leaching. And in the dam, what is now in the dams, in the water bodies? A lot of nitrates and phosphates. But water bodies do have also an ecosystem. So the phytoplankton, the algae, starts to bloom. And now they will have a huge amount on top of the water body, so that they block out the sunlight and reduce the light. The plants that are a bit deeper will die. And when they die, we know the decomposers will move into that area, and decomposers will use oxygen to start to decompose. So we know that it will be aerobic bacteria and fungi that will do the decomposition. And now the oxygen will drop. But as the decomposers use the oxygen, they start to produce energy by respiration, and they increase in numbers. And eventually, they use more and more oxygen until every piece of dead material is decomposed, and all the aquatic organisms either die in that area or move away. It can also lead to a really ugly, rotten smell because they produce H2S, or the rotten egg, hydrogen sulfide gas, and the whole area is very unpleasant. That is the damage that can be done by fertilization. And this class is a very important paragraph that I want you to pause now and see if you can repeat it, either by drawing yourself a diagram or write down the keywords and say it again, because this is now called eutrophication. Very important term to know. What is eutrophication? You see that word trophic, which means feeding. So eutrophication is where there are some extra means of feeding due to the leaching of fertilizers, referring to nitrates and phosphates from fertilizers. Algae blooms make such a huge amount that they block out the sunlight, and the sun cannot reach the deeper levels. Plants die. Other organisms die. If plants die, the decomposers increase rapidly. They use up all the oxygen. Oxygen is depleted. But they will also become an increased population. They reproduce, and the other life in that area moves away, and there can be an ugly, rotten smell. And here we see a nice diagram, where we see nitrogen, phosphorus, increase in the phytoplankton, algae blooms, and algae dies, and we have decay. The phytoplankton increase, and here we see eutrophication explained. So alternatives for industrially produced fertilizer, nitrogen-fixing crops, plant legumes. They also call it green manure because now the nitrogen is added to the soil by the soil bacteria. Some lives in the legumes and then the free-living ones are in the soil. Crop rotation makes sure that you change the type of crop because they will have different needs from that soil. By the time they are removed, some other part of the soil is replaced. That also makes sure that there are no pests. Because pests, if you plant tomatoes each year on the same spot, all the tomato pests will be ready and waiting for them. But if you change the crop, next year, no, unfortunately no food for us, and they need to move away. And that gives some time for the next pest to realize that they are a new food. No monocultures. Monocultures means you plant on a large piece of land only one type of food. Fewer pests means you have to use fewer fertilizers. And the organic fertilizers that we can use use legumes, we can do crop rotations, we can use the manure of animals, we can also plow in the dead parts of plants. Responsible use of fertilizer. Do not use a fertilizer when it is raining. Use it in the correct amounts. Do not use it near water sources. And never use it on an empty land. That is waste. Thank you. Please now complete the worksheets.
Black sunrise, always gonna be a surprise, 'cause we don't know which way it's going to go, 'cause we can see the way it's going to be, 'cause we can see.
We're talking about COVID. Babaji, tell us about the day you found out you had COVID.
The day I found out I have COVID, it was a difficult day. I didn't understand how I got COVID because I was always covered, I was always with my hand sanitizer. It came with my wife. And that whole day, I was thinking, what's gonna happen to me? I'm gonna survive. My kids, I was losing my tasting, smelling. There were some days I will test my taste buds and put like 4 or 5 chilies in my coffee. No ways. I didn't taste it.
So did you also lose your appetite in the process?
It was very funny. In the first week, no, I was chowing like I will wake up like midnight and make for me something. But after the first week, then the appetite was gone. When you go to bed, your body is also automatically switching off. And that's a dangerous time for COVID. It's like glass pinching you, cutting you inside your lungs. Then the heart was pumping like rabbit pumps. You are losing a lot of fluids at night.
Is that through fever or what?
Yeah, it's through fever.
So have you experienced any side effects from having contracted COVID-19?
No, not yet. Maybe still coming, but not yet.
And your wife?
She was complaining about light head. It's an annoying headache. It's light, but it's annoying.
So basically you didn't take any prescribed medicine from the doctor to recover from COVID?
No, I didn't. The only thing I was using is desperate for my blood not to clot. Because for some people, when your lungs are really, really infected, your blood will start to clot from the lungs, close all the airways. That's where we are passing. I'm smoking cigarette, and when you were a smoker and COVID in your lungs now.
So then after you found out, you both found out you had COVID, what did you guys do to protect the kids?
The kids move out from the house. The Buddhists will come, then we will collect everything for them and just put for them outside. When they came, just grab the food and go.
So what was the biggest battle for you? Was it mental or physical?
Mentally. Mentally was the biggest battle. I'm actually an international movie maker, and my career was cut off. I couldn't put bread on the table. There were some days have one meal for the day and went to bed. And that was hitting me in my mind. What if Blessing get corona now? Where am I gonna go? Who can I help? There were also some people depend on us in the rural areas. We couldn't help them. My future was black, dark, dark, dark. I couldn't even see that small light at the end of the tunnel. One day, my daughter decided, now, I want to see my father today. And I just told her, yeah, she can come. The first words was, Daddy, I was praying for you yesterday night. Don't worry, Corona will go back soon. And I was asking, from where? From Namibia? She said, no, not from Namibia, from you. And you are not looking good. And she was actually heartbroken. Until today, she hates Corona. From there, then I was like, oh, okay. If the smallest one is saying this, why I'm not picking me up self and do the right thing and get rid of this thing? That's where I started to run, to practice, coming to my quiet place. And actually, the main thing that broke my heart during that time was there was no one. The time of COVID, there was no one.
So can you tell us where we are right now?
We are at my silent place. I call this place my silent place. I will come here when the COVID is hitting me like 120%. Looking at the ocean, then you will hear voices like, no, you don't belong here. Today, you don't belong here. Get up and go home. Some days, they will nurse you like, no, you will survive. Your future is a bright future. You must not give up now. Think about your kids. Think about the people around you. Even the wind will do that. Actually, you must meditate. The thing of COVID is, looks like COVID is afraid. of the warmness and is friends with the coldness. So the whole time you are baking in the sun, it helps a lot.
So is that what you did?
Yeah, I did. I will do that twice a day. This was supposed to be a golden year for me, a very, very good golden year for me, but then COVID decided, no, this is not going to be your golden year. Everything was cancelled. We, the fella makers, this year, from the international shoots, lost lot of money.
You've lost 3 family members? Is it all due to COVID?
No, not all due to COVID. First one, my sister, she was very close to me. She contracted COVID April, and she was in ICU for 3 months. The COVID damaged her lungs, and at the stage her lungs collapsed and she couldn't breathe without the machines. Her kidneys failed, her liver has failed. COVID is real. First of all, COVID is real. It's not a joke. Most of the people, they fall away from COVID regulations. Still early to fall away from COVID regulations. We must still go in line with those COVID regulations.
And how long did you say it took you to recover?
3 weeks, 21 days.
What must somebody do to change your mind from the negative perspective to that positive?
COVID, no job, it's very dangerous. There was one day I just decided I'm gonna take a rope, go to the jetty, sit around there, and after all I will hang there by the jetty. The time I arrived here there was no wind, out of nowhere, the ocean was like angry, and it started to get cold, and I was like, but it was just nice weather. Then I sat down. Then the universe will talk with you, the wind, the sun, the ocean. That's the main thing of COVID. If you don't save yourself, no one will save you. And we must always appreciate what we have around us. That's the main thing in COVID. If you don't appreciate what you have around you, no, you will lose your head.
Smile, smile, smile. When you walk with me, I just want you to smile, smile.
My industry and what I've done with my hands in Namibia, it's going all over the world, and here you are, Papa G, you want to quit? Now, I'm excited for 2021. It's not gonna be the same like 2020 now. I'm back in the groove.
Give me food, clothes, water, and shelter. Nothing else, no matter. You're my moonlight in my oven. Let all my sins be forgiven.